Welcome to our channel, where we bring you heartfelt and eye-opening stories drawn from real-life inspiration. Today, we're excited to share Pregnant Wife Leaves Millionaire After Catching Him with Mistress Years Later, He Regrets It. You won't believe how this incredible tale ends. Years after losing everything, our remorseful millionaire fights to redeem himself and earn back a fraction of the life he once destroyed. Will he succeed in rebuilding trust with his daughter and the wife he betrayed? Or has his betrayal set an unbreakable wall between them forever? Stay tuned to find out the emotional outcome of this riveting story. We promise every moment, from the shocking discovery to the powerful conclusion, will keep you on the edge of your seat. If you enjoy stories that highlight resilience, second chances, and the untamed force of genuine regret, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing amazing tales that connect with your heart. Also, feel free to comment and tell us where you're listening from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Diana Moretti had always imagined her life unfolding like the tranquil pages of a well-loved novel, steady, uplifting, and guided by the gentle hum of familial warmth. Raised in a modest suburb near Charleston, she grew up surrounded by the quiet rhythms of her parents' everyday labor. Her father, Ronald, was a devoted high school counselor who never stopped reminding her that true success was measured by kindness rather than wealth, and her mother, Celia, taught piano lessons to neighborhood children, filling the house with a music that was simultaneously delicate and strong. Diana's early years were marked by evenings of laughter and simple pleasures, homemade pot roast, neighbors dropping by unannounced for tea, and a yard that came alive in the summer with fireflies that her mother poetically called dancing stars. While she admired the subtle grace of her upbringing, she also nurtured secret dreams of seeing what existed beyond her small corner of the world. In her teenage days, she fantasized about exploring bustling cities or walking down famous boulevards, her eyes brimming with an unquenchable curiosity for life's possibilities. When Diana turned 23, her aspirations began to shift into a more tangible form. She took up a position at a local design firm, assisting real estate developers who were repurposing old buildings into modern commercial spaces. That was where her path first crossed with Marcus Turner, a confident and undeniably charismatic entrepreneur who owned an emerging real estate empire. Marcus was only in his late 20s, yet stood on the cusp of becoming a self-made millionaire. Possessing a talent for spotting lucrative development opportunities and wooing investors, he inspired both admiration and envy in those who knew him. Rumor had it that he traveled by private jet to meet financiers in New York, and he regularly attended black-tie soirees organized by top industry leaders. He was in many ways the epitome of ambition. Their initial meeting happened at a corporate charity event hosted by Diana's boss. Far from feeling at ease, Diana found herself lost among a sea of designer suits, people clinking glasses of champagne while discussing large-scale property acquisitions she could scarcely wrap her mind around. Standing near the bar, she overheard a conversation about renovating a historic part of downtown Charleston, a project near and dear to her heart. Leaning in to catch more details, she suddenly noticed a tall figure with piercing gray eyes had joined the circle. That man was Marcus Turner. The moment he turned to acknowledge her, Diana felt something shift within her, an inkling of fate that told her this fleeting interaction might mark a pivotal moment in her life. At first, their exchange was cordial and professional. Diana spoke passionately about preserving the district's heritage, describing the architectural nuances she wanted to maintain, while Marcus outlined his vision of blending modern amenities with the city's historic charm. Their dialogue was punctuated by light-hearted jokes, brief glimpses of a genuine connection beyond the formalities. Marcus seemed taken by her earnestness and asked for her number, proposing that they continue their discussion over coffee. The invitation, though somewhat unexpected, left Diana both nervous and intrigued. She could sense that behind Marcus's carefully practiced social grace lay an undercurrent of sincerity. A few days later, they met at a small riverside cafe where they chatted far longer than anticipated, only leaving when the staff politely indicated that closing time had come and go. From that point forward, Diana and Marcus were nearly inseparable, caught in the whirlwind of a blossoming relationship that grew faster than either had anticipated. On the surface, it was a story that many people only dreamed of. Diana, the gentle soul from a modest background, and Marcus, the wealthy real estate magnate whose business dealings seemed to expand by the month. But even beyond the fairy tale contrast in their upbringings, something genuine emerged. They talked for hours about future goals, lessons from childhood, and aspirations to give back to their communities. Marcus revealed that, despite his outward confidence, he often felt pressured to succeed. His early deals had been overshadowed by naysayers who believed he rode solely on connections or fleeting luck, which triggered in him an incessant need to prove himself worthy of leading a real estate empire. In those early days, Marcus's affection for Diana seemed determined and real. He introduced her to renowned architects and successful investors at industry conferences, making no secret of how proud he was of her insights, especially her knack for combining design innovation with historical preservation. Meanwhile, Diana brought Marcus home to meet her parents, who were initially overwhelmed by his polished demeanor and formidable ambition. Yet his politeness and genuine interest in their stories quickly won them over. Ronald, in particular, saw that while Marcus exuded confidence, he also had vulnerabilities. Hints of a young man who felt that a single failure might tarnish everything he had built. Their lives became a careful balancing act. On weekends, they traveled to property locations in major cities, evaluating whether the crumbling facades could be refurbished into upscale condominiums or classy hotels. Marcus began entrusting Diana with increasingly important tasks, appreciating her eye for subtle details that most developers overlooked. Even so, she was still the Diana who found joy in strolling through open-air markets, tasting homemade jams and chatting freely with folks she met along the way. Marcus was a quick study, eagerly following her lead on exploring local cultures, a welcome contrast to the highly curated settings he was used to. When their relationship matured, Marcus proposed to Diana on a starlit night at a vineyard outside of Florence. He had arranged a candlelit dinner table among the vines, with soft violin music playing in the background. Though his gestures might have seemed ostentatious in someone else's hands, there was a heartfelt sincerity in his eyes when he knelt down, ring in hand, and asked if she would be his wife. For Diana, it was both surreal and wondrous to become engaged to a man who represented everything she once believed was unattainable. She said yes, tears of joy reflecting in the candlelight, and they embraced under a wide Tuscan sky. Their wedding took place the following summer, a lavish yet surprisingly intimate affair in a garden estate. Roses adorned the pergola where they exchanged vows, and friends and family from both backgrounds mingled under twinkling lanterns. Dressed in a flowing lace gown, Diana felt as though she were standing at the intersection of her past and her future. Marcus, clad in an impeccable tailored tuxedo, slipped a diamond wedding band onto her finger with trembling hands. Their first dance was magical, a testament to the fact that, in that very moment, they believed in each other's sincerity beyond all measure. The reception was filled with laughter and whispered blessings. Ronald, ever the proud father, gave a toast that drew appreciative smiles, warning them that marriage would require patience, humility, and unwavering commitment. It seemed all too perfect, like the apex of a love story. Yet beneath the surface, the seeds of future struggles were quietly germinating, waiting for circumstances to water them into full bloom. In the months after their wedding, Diana and Marcus settled into a palatial estate on the outskirts of Charleston. The property had high walls, manicured lawns, and a sense of distinction that initially left Diana in awe. There were days she felt like she was living inside a glossy magazine feature. Everything was perfectly curated, from the sculptures in the foyer to the panoramic windows in the living room. Marcus, thriving in his element, continued to expand his real estate ventures, finalizing large deals in booming markets like Atlanta and Miami. At first, Diana viewed his constant absence as part of his pursuit of success, an inevitable price one pays for dealing in big money. She stayed behind to manage her own design projects and the day-to-day affairs of their household, occasionally accompanied by a small staff Marcus had hired to ensure their home ran smoothly. Yet over time, an unsettling shift began to take form. Instead of sharing cozy nights discussing future goals or dreaming up philanthropic projects, Marcus started coming home exhausted, sometimes reeking of cologne that wasn't familiar to Diana or stumbling in at odd hours. His phone buzzed incessantly. More than once, she glimpsed cryptic text messages that were quickly dismissed as business matters. And though he tried to reassure her, "It's all for us, for our future," there was a growing sense that his words were no longer as steadfast as they once were. Still, Diana attempted to reason with herself. He was under immense pressure to close deals, maintain relationships with high-end investors, and keep up with the lifestyle he believed she deserved. Then, as if fate wanted to magnify their bond or test their resilience, Diana discovered she was pregnant. The realization came on a calm autumn morning. She had felt dizzy spells and waves of nausea for a few weeks, but only when the at-home test displayed the positive sign did it sink in. Diana was going to be a mother. The news electrified her with a blend of excitement and trepidation, especially given the demands of Marcus's schedule. With a gentle smile, she planned a heartfelt way to tell him, placing a tiny baby shoe atop his desk with a note that read, "We're growing our love together." He reacted with surprise that quickly morphed into exuberant joy. In the first few days following the announcement, Marcus genuinely seemed transformed. He spent extra time at home, rubbing her back when morning sickness flared, and reading snippets from books on parenting. In those moments, Diana glimpsed the man she'd married, the one who spoke about building not just properties, but a positive legacy. However, that emotional high was short-lived. Marcus soon ramped his work schedule back up, flying off to secure more properties and meet potential investors in far-flung cities. His reasoning was always rooted in providing a better life for Diana and the baby. On one particularly lonely evening, Diana found herself in their massive kitchen, preparing dinner for two and refusing to believe, until the very last minute, that he wouldn't walk through the door. Tears stung her eyes when the clock hit midnight and the house remained silent. She tried sending him messages that went unanswered. When she finally reached him the next morning, his explanation was heartbreakingly casual. An impromptu business dinner had extended, and his phone had died. To her dismay, the distance between them felt both physical and emotional. In search of comfort and guidance, Diana leaned on her oldest friend, Carla Foster, who had known her since middle school. Over mugs of chamomile tea in Diana's sunroom, Carla listened patiently, occasionally offering a gentle squeeze of the hand in understanding. Carla reminded Diana that marriage was rarely seamless and that Marcus might well be overwhelmed. "But that doesn't justify being absent, does it?" Diana asked, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "I'm going to bring a child into this world, Carla. I'm terrified." That raw confession revealed a reality that weighed heavily on Diana's spirit. She was balancing the glow of motherhood with the fear that her husband was slipping away from her. In the hopes of bridging the gap, Diana tried joining Marcus on a few of his work trips. She told him she wanted to understand his schedule better, and maybe even offer input on new projects. Initially, he was receptive. During a weekend in New York, they managed to share an elegant dinner after his round of meetings, strolling through Central Park afterwards, arms linked like newlyweds. The crisp night air seemed to awaken a spark of closeness between them. Yet even in that moment, she noticed how quickly he reached for his phone to check messages. It was as though an invisible tether pulled him back into his business orbit. One late evening, while Marcus was supposedly working, Diana decided to bring him a care package of homemade sandwiches and fruit to his corporate suite. Arriving at the sleek office building, she discovered the lights off and no sign of an all-night meeting in progress. The guard at the front desk awkwardly informed her that Mr. Turner had left hours ago. Confusion and dread mingled in her mind. She replayed the excuses he had given her earlier, something about having to finalize a major contract and push through last-minute paperwork. Feeling drained, she left the package at the desk with a note. "Thinking of you. Come home soon." And as she walked back to her car, the night sky felt colder, the quiet city streets ominously reflecting her private distress. By the time she reached her third trimester, Diana was fighting off severe exhaustion, but her emotional fatigue was far worse than any physical ailment. Marcus came home increasingly late, and when confronted, he offered vague explanations or brushed off her concerns. She would wake up to find him in the guest room, claiming he didn't want to disturb her rest, a claim that felt both considerate and suspicious. Once, in a flash of misguided optimism, Diana placed her hand on his arm, softly requesting that they attend a couples counseling session. Marcus responded with a dismissive laugh and a wave of his hand as if to say, "That's not necessary. We just need more time." Amid this tension, there were still fleeting instances that reminded her why she had fallen in love with him. A freshly picked bouquet of lilies on her nightstand, or a tender kiss on her forehead when he assumed she was asleep. These small gestures offered momentary relief, but they weren't enough to dispel the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Diana found herself praying for resolution, whether that meant Marcus would finally open up or that the painful truth she suspected might come to light, letting her decide her next step. Then the reality she dreaded arrived in the most devastating way possible. One evening, close to Diana's due date, her intuition screamed that something was off. Unable to shake the feeling, she wandered through the house, calling out for Marcus but receiving no response. Heart pounding, she checked the garage and realized his car wasn't there. A wave of nausea, part worry, part heartbreak, washed over her. She tried calling his cell multiple times, each call going straight to voicemail. Gazing at the mirrors in the foyer, she caught a glimpse of herself, a heavily pregnant woman, eyes brimming with tears, wanting nothing more than honesty and comfort from the man who claimed to cherish her. Resolved to uncover the truth, she texted Carla, who bravely offered to accompany her to track Marcus down. Together, they drove to his office downtown. This time, a faint light shone through the glass exterior, suggesting at least someone was still inside. Diana's heart thumped erratically with each step she took toward his private suite. The entire building was eerily silent, devoid of the usual bustling assistants and phone calls. As they approached the door to his main office, Diana heard muffled laughter, soft, intimate, and clearly belonging to two people who were far more than colleagues. Casting a worried glance at Carla, she steeled herself and pushed the door open. The scene that greeted her confirmed all her fears. Marcus was intimately entwined with a beautiful brunette whom Diana recognized as Bianca Holmes, a shrewd investor he had recently partnered with on a sizable development deal. Documents and blueprints had been scattered around the desk, but the disarray was overshadowed by the unmistakable closeness of their bodies. Shock and betrayal stiffened every muscle in Diana's being. She felt her breath hitch, her eyes blurring with tears. Only a few seconds ago, she had been consumed by suspicion. Now the unimaginable was laid bare before her. Marcus, startled, jumped up from his chair, nearly toppling a lamp in his haste to cover up the situation. Bianca sank behind the desk, trying to gather her jacket, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of guilt and defiance. For an agonizing few moments, no one spoke. The air was thick with a tension so overwhelming it seemed to echo Diana's own racing heart. The painful truth of Marcus's absence, his odd phone habits, the faint lip gloss stains on his dress shirts, all of it coalesced into a single reality. He had been unfaithful at a time when they were supposed to be building a family. With trembling lips, Diana turned away, tears streaming down her face as Carla guided her back toward the elevator. Marcus's frantic calls of, "Wait, please, let me explain," reverberated through the hallway, but the damage was irreversible. Diana's lower abdomen tightened in an unfamiliar pain, a potent reminder that she was only days away from giving birth. The emotional devastation, layered with the physical toll on her body, threatened to overwhelm her. Though Carla offered to drive, Diana insisted she could manage, fixating on the road in an effort to remain calm. Every kilometer felt like a dreamlike haze, images of Marcus's betrayal replaying in her mind, punctuated by the relentless throb of heartbreak. Once home, Diana locked herself in the bedroom she used to share with Marcus. The plush duvet and decorative pillows felt like an eerie mockery of the devotion she had invested in their relationship. She clutched her belly, whispering soothing words to her unborn child, trying to assure herself that the baby deserved her full focus, her unwavering love. Yet she couldn't hold back the sobs that racked her body. Each cry felt like a jagged tear in the tapestry of trust she and Marcus had woven over the past years. It didn't take long for Marcus to return and pound on the door, voice strained with desperation. He pleaded through the thick wood, claiming it had been a moment of weakness, insisting Bianca meant nothing, and that stress had led him astray. "I'm sorry, Diana. Please open up," he repeated over and over. But in that moment, Diana could only recall the image of them together. Bianca's arms looped around him like a serpent. The memory seemed seared into her mind, an ever-present testament to the gravity of his betrayal. Gradually, his pleas died down. She heard him slump against the hallway wall, letting out ragged sighs. The weight of betrayal pressed so heavily on Diana's chest that she found it difficult to breathe. When morning came, she emerged from the room only to find Marcus asleep on the couch, his face lined with exhaustion. Though he woke the instant she stepped into the living area, Diana refused to let him speak. She gathered a few essentials, carefully packed a week's worth of clothes and placed them in a suitcase. Her plan was clear: leave now, sort out the legalities later. She was done waiting for him to choose fidelity over his wandering desires. She had a child to protect, and in her eyes, the home that had once felt magnificent now seemed to be made of little more than illusions and heartbreak. Marcus trailed after her, offering to drive her anywhere, to pay for whatever she needed. But Diana refused. She managed to get into her car without further confrontation, leaving him standing in the driveway wearing wrinkled slacks and a shirt that still carried a trace of Bianca's perfume. She headed straight for Carla's cozy townhouse, a refuge in contrast to the mansion's hollow grandeur. Carla opened the door and enveloped Diana in a warm hug, ushering her to a spare bedroom that was modest but welcoming. There, Diana collapsed onto the bed, feeling a wave of relief just to be away from the sight of her deepest pain. The next hours were a blur. Ronald and Celia, upon hearing of the betrayal, offered to fly out immediately. Diana told them to wait. She needed a moment to catch her breath and figure out a plan. Carla brewed pot after pot of calming teas and rubbed her friend's shoulders, assuring her that she had not failed. "He failed you," Carla would say, her voice trembling with righteous indignation. Late into the night, Diana found herself gazing out a second-floor window, haunted by a tumult of thoughts. The betrayal and heartbreak were real, yet she sensed a fierce new resolve igniting within her. A maternal instinct insisted that no matter what, she would give her child a stable life, free from the manipulations of a man who had broken his vows. Diana's pregnancy complications escalated soon after. Whether triggered by stress or simply timing, she went into labor earlier than expected. Around dawn 2 days later, she woke up with intense contractions. Carla helped her into the car and sped off to the nearest hospital, anxiety etched on her face. Each jolt of pain in Diana's abdomen was a stark reminder that she was on the brink of motherhood, whether emotionally ready or not. As hospital staff whisked her onto a gurney, hooking her up to IVs and fetal monitors, Diana realized that the life stirring inside her would soon be in her arms, relying on her for protection. Word traveled quickly, and by midday, Ronald and Celia were en route, while Carla kept watch by Diana's bedside. Marcus also found out, likely alerted by someone at the hospital. He arrived looking distraught, hair disheveled, with an expression that vacillated between terror and regret. "Please let me help," he entreated as he approached the labor ward. Although Diana was furious at him, the hospital staff allowed him to remain in the corridor, where he paced like a nervous ghost. The labor itself was grueling, further complicated by exhaustion and emotional turmoil. But at last, after hours that felt like an eternity, the baby emerged into the world, a baby girl with a surprisingly hearty cry. Diana, drenched in sweat and tears, cradled the newborn in her arms, overwhelmed by a love so profound that it momentarily erased all other thoughts. She named her daughter Lily, a homage to the innocence and purity she hoped this child would embody. In the blur of postpartum relief and swirling emotions, Diana caught sight of Marcus peering from the doorway, eyes full of awe and sorrow. While hospital protocol allowed him to enter the room, Diana's walls were firmly up. She permitted him to hold Lily for a moment, though she refused to meet his gaze. Part of her recognized the significance of a father's presence for their child, but her heart was too raw for any closeness. Marcus, tearful, whispered apologies and promises of change. But to Diana, they sounded like the faint echoes of broken vows. She stiffened each time he mentioned doing better. She had heard enough empty words. When Celia and Ronald arrived, Marcus quietly ceded his spot, letting the grandparents rejoice in the new life. Celia caressed Lily's velvety cheek, marveling at how the baby's tiny fingers wrapped around her own. Ronald gave Diana a soft, meaningful kiss on the forehead, reminding her that she had a home waiting for her if she chose to come back. Although physically spent, Diana felt an undeniable determination. She was done placing her fate in someone else's hands. Her immediate priority was Lily's well-being, and if that meant forging a life absent from Marcus's illusions, so be it. 2 days later, with Lily deemed healthy, Diana was discharged. She cradled her newborn as Carla pulled up to the hospital's entrance. Marcus tried to help them to the car, but Diana politely refused. She thanked him for being present at the birth, but her voice carried an unmistakable finality. As she slid into the passenger seat, her eyes drifted to Marcus standing helplessly on the sidewalk, weighed down by the consequences of his betrayal. Diana's new life started in that moment, one in which heartbreak would not dictate her future, only her own resolve would. Settling into Carla's townhouse with a newborn was far from easy. Lily's round-the-clock feeding schedule and Diana's postpartum soreness left both mother and child exhausted. More than once, Carla arrived home from work to find Diana asleep on the couch, Lily dozing on her chest, tears staining Diana's cheeks from a mixture of hormonal shifts and emotional upheaval. Carla's home, while welcoming, was small. Two modest bedrooms, a cramped living space, and a kitchen barely large enough for a table and chairs. Still, to Diana, it felt like a sanctuary, a far cry from the echoing halls and polished marble floors of the estate she had fled. Marcus called incessantly, leaving voicemails that alternated between contrite pleas and panicked offers of financial assistance. In a stroke of clarity, Diana decided her conversations with him needed a legal framework. She contacted an attorney, Patricia Schaffer, known for her expertise in family law. Patricia outlined Diana's options. She could sue for a large settlement, given Marcus's substantial assets and clear fault in breaking marital vows. Yet Diana's first concern was not money but independence. She requested only the child support mandated by law, determined to make her own way rather than remain tethered to Marcus's wealth. Patricia admired her resolve, cautioning her that navigating such a case while caring for a newborn would be taxing, both mentally and physically. By the time Lily was a month old, Diana had found a modest apartment in a working-class neighborhood. It had creaking floorboards and outdated kitchen cabinets, but it was hers. With the help of Carla and a few neighbors, Diana painted the walls in soft pastel shades, determined to create a soothing environment for her daughter. Each evening, she rocked Lily to sleep by the faint glow of a standing lamp, humming lullabies she recalled from her childhood. The simpler life took some adjusting. No housekeeping staff, no private chef, no glitzy dinners. Yet the humility of budgeting for groceries and cooking meals from scratch brought her a sense of purpose and groundedness that she had not felt in a long time. Gradually, she started looking for freelance design work, tapping into her old network. Despite the scandal swirling around her separation, some former colleagues respected her talent and entrusted her with small jobs, from drafting interior layouts to consulting on minor property revamps. Each completed project gave her a much-needed jolt of self-confidence. Whenever Carla asked how she was coping, Diana answered with a brave smile, though flashes of doubt still lingered. She had left her wealthy husband, father of her child, in the aftermath of betrayal. But Lily's presence burned like a guiding torch. The baby's every gurgle, every wide-eyed stare at the world around her, became a testament to life's resilience. Ronald and Celia eventually flew in, staying for a few weeks to help. They insisted on cooking hearty meals, taking Lily for strolls in a second-hand pram, and bolstering Diana's morale in the myriad ways that only parents can. Late one evening, Ronald gently told Diana he was proud of her. "It takes more courage to walk away from a broken promise than to stay in a gilded cage," he said, referencing the mansion she had left behind. Tears welled in Diana's eyes. She knew that while the road ahead offered no guarantee of simplicity, she had already reclaimed control over her destiny. Meanwhile, Marcus's carefully built empire began to show cracks. When news broke of his affair, some investors distanced themselves, citing concern over his reliability and judgment. He had already been juggling multiple developments that required delicate negotiations, and the accompanying media coverage of his failing marriage only fueled doubts about his ability to keep it all afloat. Moreover, the real estate market in some regions turned volatile, forcing him to take calculated risks that sometimes backfired. One ill-fated project in Chicago lost its major financier at the 11th hour, incurring substantial losses and leaving Marcus scrambling for damage control. As those close to him later recounted, Marcus seemed tormented. He spent his days trying to rescue faltering deals, his nights plagued by insomnia. He downsized from the estate to a more modest penthouse in the city, presumably to cut costs and distance himself from the site of his betrayal. He also sought therapy, quietly at first, as he was reluctant to let the press or business associates see him as vulnerable. In counseling sessions, he voiced regrets he had never dared articulate before, acknowledging that his single-minded pursuit of success had been fueled by insecurity and an inflated ego. Beneath the veneer of his financial achievements lay deep-seated fear, fear of being overshadowed by wealthier rivals, fear of failing at the exact moment he was expected to triumph, and a crippling fear that he was, at heart, unworthy of genuine love. The realization of what he had lost sank in further whenever he tried to schedule visits to see Lily. Diana, acting on Patricia's legal advice, insisted on structured visits in a neutral location. Initially, the sight of his daughter, tiny, vulnerable, and wondrous in her every coup, brought him to tears. Here was a living embodiment of what might have been a joyous union. Yet Lily's mother was distant, signing paperwork with a stoic demeanor that revealed none of the warmth he once knew. Each time he handed Lily back to Diana, he felt a piece of himself tear away, burdened by the knowledge that he was the architect of this fractured family. With each setback, Marcus discovered that wealth was a precarious shield, one that could not protect him from emotional devastation. The high-rise offices, the swanky dinners, the accolades, none of it mattered in the silent hours when he gazed at pictures of Lily on his phone. He attempted to reconcile more thoroughly, sending Diana heartfelt letters, even floral arrangements that arrived with softly worded apology notes. She remained guarded, though. For her, it wasn't about retribution. She simply had no room in her life for a partner who could betray her at her most vulnerable. What she needed was to chart a stable path for Lily, one uncluttered by Marcus's illusions or half-truths. News of Marcus's transformed lifestyle filtered through mutual acquaintances. Some gossiped that he had begun volunteering at nonprofits to restore his public image. Others whispered that the downturn in his finances was more severe than he let on, and that he was living off emergency capital. A longtime friend, Gregory Shaw, a figure somewhat reminiscent of the role Carla played in Diana's life, remarked privately that Marcus looked exhausted, haunted by an ever-present sorrow. Yet for Diana, these rumors held little sway. She was forging ahead, forging a new identity, and that identity was inextricably entwined with single motherhood, financial independence, and a resolute unwillingness to let betrayal define her future. When Lily turned 2, the divorce became official. The courtroom proceeding was brief. Both sides had largely agreed on custody terms, child support, and the division of assets that Diana had opted to keep minimal. That day felt strangely anticlimactic to Diana. She arrived in a simple blouse and a pencil skirt, focusing mostly on not letting Lily fidget too much as they waited for the final confirmation. Marcus kept his distance, presumably to honor Diana's boundary. His eyes flickered with regret when the judge pronounced the end of their marriage. Diana merely exhaled, hugging Lily closer. It's over, she thought, her mind swirling with relief and sorrow in equal measure. Afterwards, Carla and a few close friends organized a low-key evening at a bistro to support Diana. Sipping on sparkling water, she had cut out alcohol to keep her energies focused on Lily. She found herself reflecting on how drastically life had changed since her starry-eyed engagement. Gone were the illusions of the perfect mansion, the power couple status, the illusions of forever that once seemed so vividly real. In their place was a gritty determination to succeed on her own terms. Her design portfolio was growing, and she even started flirting with the idea of launching a niche interior design boutique. She had already hired one part-time assistant, a testament to how her business was gaining traction. While she couldn't take Lily on grand vacations just yet, she managed smaller joys: a day at the local aquarium, a drive out to the countryside to visit a friend's horse farm. Each new memory felt richer, more genuine, because it was rooted in the choices she was making daily. Marcus, as part of the custody arrangement, was granted supervised visits at first, gradually transitioning to unsupervised time as Lily grew and Diana deemed it safe. Each handover was cordial, but never warm. In Lily's eyes, her father existed as a somewhat mysterious figure who arrived to take her to a playground or bring her new books and then disappeared. Diana remained neutral in her descriptions of Marcus, refusing to color Lily's image of him with the pain of the past. Yet whenever Lily asked why Mommy and Daddy didn't live together, Diana calmly explained that sometimes grown-ups can't fix the mistakes that break their homes, but that doesn't mean they love you any less. To Diana's surprise, as the months passed, Marcus respected her boundaries more consistently. He no longer showed up unannounced, no longer pressed her for reconciliation. Instead, he channeled his energy into fatherhood, showing genuine kindness and involvement whenever he spent time with Lily. Occasionally, Diana overheard him chatting with their daughter about responsibility and compassion, as if he was passing on lessons he had learned through deep regret. A flicker of admiration occasionally touched her heart. She could see his growth. But the scars of betrayal ran deep, and she was not prepared to let down her guard. Rather, she allowed him to prove his reliability to Lily, step by step. Though Diana had avoided major social events for a time, she eventually re-emerged, attending gatherings for design professionals and even philanthropic galas. At one such gala, she encountered an acquaintance who blurted out that Marcus had made notable contributions to support single-parent families in underserved communities. Though her immediate reaction was skepticism, after all, that could just be a public relations tactic, she had also noticed glimpses of sincerity in his more recent actions. It took an effort to admit that maybe, just maybe, he was genuinely striving to become a better man. When Lily reached 4, Diana's design boutique finally opened in a small, sunlit studio space downtown. She proudly hung a sign over the door that read, Rossetti Designs, using her maiden name to symbolize her rebirth. On opening day, Carla, Ronald, Celia, and a few dear clients gathered to celebrate. White balloons dotted the entrance, and inside displays showcased the blend of modern and rustic designs that Diana had become known for. From the crisp lines of contemporary furniture to carefully chosen antique accents that told stories of times gone by, her approach was a reflection of who she had always been at her core, a bridge between heritage and innovation. That same afternoon, Marcus showed up unannounced, carrying Lily in his arms and a bouquet of lilies in homage to their daughter's name. Diana, flustered but also touched, welcomed them politely. A quiet hush fell among the guests, many of whom were aware of the painful past between the two. Lily, excited about the decorations, wriggled free from her father's grasp to run around the studio, giggling at the newness of it all. With a respectful bow of his head, Marcus congratulated Diana on her success, handing her the flowers without fanfare. She studied the blooms for a moment, delicate petals, radiant, pure, and felt a swirl of emotion she couldn't immediately name. Pride, for how far she'd come. Relief, that he was maintaining proper boundaries. Maybe even a semblance of forgiveness that lay dormant, waiting for the right moment to blossom. Marcus stayed only briefly, mindful not to intrude on her big day. He trailed after Lily for a few minutes, guiding her so she wouldn't bump into the display stands. Before leaving, he gave Diana a small card. "Just a note," he said softly, "telling you I'm proud of you. Harn." The moment was disarmingly civil, reminiscent of two acquaintances who had shared a profound bond, but now stood on separate paths. Diana noticed her parents exchanging significant glances, silently acknowledging Marcus's unexpected show of humility. Later that evening, after the boutique's celebration wrapped up, Diana found time to read the card. Inside, Marcus had scribbled a heartfelt message. "Seeing you accomplish your dreams reminds me how wrong I was to ever overlook what matters most. Our daughter is lucky to have you as her mother. I hope this success brings you every happiness." She felt a wave of conflicting emotions, yet for the first time since she caught him with Bianca, a part of her softened toward him. It wasn't enough to erase the betrayal, but it signaled that not all transformations were feigned. Perhaps in his own way, Marcus was on a journey toward redemption. Over the following year, Diana continued to thrive professionally. She hired 2 more team members and landed contracts for boutique hotels, aiming to blend historical architecture with modern comfort. Lily, now steadily bounding into childhood, would often accompany her mother on site visits, wide-eyed at the machinery and color palettes. The presence of her daughter served as a constant reminder that new beginnings were possible. And each time she handed a revised design plan to a client, Diana felt the steady cadence of faith in herself grow stronger. Still, she maintained a cordial but guarded rapport with Marcus. They had civil discussions about Lily's education. He helped pay for a reputable private preschool, and she made sure to keep him informed of Lily's progress. Their co-parenting dynamic could never quite be described as friendly, Yet it revolved around mutual respect for Lily's best interests. While Diana no longer bristled at the mention of Marcus's name, she remained cautious, unwilling to let memories of heartbreak fade entirely into the background. As the years went on, an unspoken accord emerged between Diana and Marcus. They would never be the starry-eyed couple they once were, but they could work together for the sake of Lily's happiness. By the time Lily was 8, she had grown into a spirited, inquisitive child who loved painting, visiting the local library, and peppering her mother with questions about design. Marcus attended her school recitals, capturing every moment on his phone. Diana noticed his genuine enthusiasm, a far cry from the distracted man he once was. For Lily's 9th birthday, he organized a simple picnic in a public park, complete with balloons and a homemade cake. Diana was invited. Despite initial reservations, she accepted, wanting Lily to cherish memories of both parents together. The picnic was relaxed and unpretentious, full of children's laughter and bright birthday decorations. Marcus extended a bouquet to Diana when she arrived. Not lilies this time, but vibrant wildflowers that mirrored Lily's blossoming personality. The look in his eyes spoke of gratitude. They chatted briefly, mostly about Lily's recent fascination with astronomy, and parted with a hint of warmth that would have been unthinkable just a few years prior. Over the course of the afternoon, Diana allowed herself to observe Marcus in a new light, calmer, humbler, and attentive. He held Lily's hand gently, guided her through fun outdoor games, and took pictures that documented her big smiles. He no longer appeared weighed down by hidden agendas or the demands of an insatiable ego. And in one fleeting instant, Diana felt the smallest pang of empathy. People can change, but that doesn't erase past pain, nor does it necessarily rewrite the future. In later conversations with Carla, Diana confided that she might never fully forgive Marcus in the sense of wiping the slate clean, but she did appreciate the transformation he had worked hard to achieve. She admitted that Lily deserved a father who was present and caring, and if Marcus had finally learned that lesson, it was the best gift he could offer their daughter. As for her own heart, Diana was at peace with the trajectory of her life. She had carved out a fulfilling career, and she had learned that self-love and empowerment were the keys to sustaining any future relationship. No longer did she see her worth solely through the lens of marital status or another person's validation. And so, in the quiet suburb where Diana chose to remain, balancing motherhood with her burgeoning design enterprise, she discovered a sense of closure. She would always recall the day she found her pregnant self betrayed, a day that tested the very fabric of her beliefs. But she also found it in herself to stand firm, to walk away, and to build a world for Lily and herself that was shaped by integrity, authenticity, and love that did not rely on illusions. Her story stood as proof that while love can be fractured by deceit, life continues to offer new chances for growth, understanding, and even a tempered form of redemption for those willing to earn it day by day. If you've made it this far, you already know how intense this story is. But there's so much more to unravel about the consequences of betrayal, the power of forgiveness, and the hidden strength it takes to walk away when trust is broken. Our channel is dedicated to bringing you stories that spark deep emotions and leave you reflecting on the choices we make in life. Did our main character's missteps resonate with you? Or maybe it was the single mother's unwavering resolve that touched your heart? We'd love to hear your personal opinions and experiences. Drop them in the comments below. Let us know if you enjoyed this story, and be sure to tell us where you're tuning in from. By sharing these experiences, we can all learn from each other and grow together. Don't miss out on our future uploads. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay connected for more captivating stories. See you in the next one.
The invitation was heavier than a tombstone embossed with the gold logo she had designed. The St. Regis Ballroom would be glittering a monument to the empire her ex-husband Richard Sterling had built, or rather, the empire he had stolen. He was bringing her the new wife, the woman who had replaced Hannah in her home, her life, and her company. Hannah Juliet was supposed to be a ghost, a forgotten footnote. But when Richard raised his glass to toast his new life, he made one fatal miscalculation. He invited the woman who knew exactly where all the bodies were buried. The cardstock was so thick it felt more like a decree than an invitation. Sterling Innovations, a decade of vision. Hannah Juliet ran her thumb over the embossed logo, a stylized S intertwining with an I that formed the shape of a microchip. It was clever. It was sleek. She knew because she had sketched it on a cocktail napkin 10 years and a lifetime ago, back when Sterling Innovations was just 2 laptops, a rented garage, and a shared dream. Now it was Richard's dream. Only Richard's. The invitation was for a 10th anniversary gala and, insultingly, a Humanitarian of the Year award ceremony. Richard Sterling Humanitarian. Hannah let out a short, bitter laugh that died in the quiet of her minimalist condo. The condo was her prize from the divorce. While Richard kept the sprawling glass and steel mansion they had built together, the courts had awarded Hannah this sterile high-rise apartment with a lovely view of the city, a city he now essentially owned. She was about to toss the invitation into the shredder alongside the junk mail and catalogs when her phone buzzed. It was Sophia Valenti, her best friend and the bulldog lawyer who had dragged her through the divorce. "You got it, didn't you?" Sophia's voice was sharp, all business. "The golden ticket to my personal hell," Hannah murmured, sinking onto a plush gray sofa. "He wants to gloat, Soph. He wants to parade his 24-year-old wife in front of the entire industry." "Amber Price," Sophia said, the name dripping with disdain. "The executive assistant he was mentoring." "Right." There was a pause, the clicking of a keyboard. "You know, Hannah, he probably does want to gloat. Men like Richard are black holes of narcissism. But he also probably doesn't expect you to show up." "And I won't. Why would I?" "Because you're not the same woman he discarded, Hannah. Because you're not a victim. And," Sophia's voice lowered, "because you are technically still a 12% shareholder." Hannah winced. The 12% was the one thing Sophia had managed to claw back for her. Richard had tried to argue that her initial $200,000 investment, her entire inheritance, was a spousal gift. But the paperwork was ironclad. He had been forced to dilute her role, strip her of her co-founder title, and muzzle her with a ferocious non-disclosure agreement, but he couldn't take her original shares. They were a festering splinter under his skin, and a constant bitter reminder for her. "What's the point, Sophia? I show up, he smirks. Amber shows off a diamond the size of an ice cube, and I go home feeling small." "No, you show up looking like the queen you are. You remind those people, the board members, the investors, the engineers who worked with you, that you were the brains. He was just the megaphone. You don't have to say a word. Your presence is the word." Hannah looked around her silent apartment. It was beautiful. It was safe. And it was a cage. For 2 years she had been rebuilding. She'd started a small, successful tech consultancy specializing in ethical AI integration. She was respected in her small circle, but she wasn't known. Richard had systematically erased her from the company's history. The official story was that he was the sole founder, the visionary. She was just the first Mrs. Sterling. "He'll be with her," Hannah whispered, the old wound aching. Amber. All blonde hair, sharp angles, and ruthless ambition. The last time Hannah had seen her in person was at the deposition where Amber had coolly lied under oath about the timeline of their affair. "Yes, he will," Sophia said, her voice softening for a moment. "And it will hurt. But Hannah, you know what hurts more. Letting him win. Letting him believe he broke you. Don't go for him. Don't go for Amber. Go for you. Go for the woman who spent sleepless nights coding the prototype for the Aura system while he was out networking. Go for the woman who deserved to be on the cover of Forbes right next to him." Hannah closed her eyes. She remembered the garage, the smell of cold pizza, stale coffee, and the electric hum of the servers. She remembered the moment the first Aura unit booted up, its light pulsing a soft blue. It was her light, her idea. "Okay," Hannah said, her voice small but firm. "Okay, Soph, I'll go, but you're helping me pick out the dress." "Oh, honey." Sophia laughed, the sound pure steel. We're not picking a dress. We're choosing armor. The next 2 weeks were a blur of calculated preparation. This wasn't just about finding a dress. It was about rematerializing. Hannah was a ghost and she needed to become flesh and blood again. First, the armor. Sophia dragged her to a private atelier, waving off the trendy, flashy gowns that Amber would inevitably favor. No sequins, no feathers, no look-at-me desperation, Sophia decreed. You're not competing, you're judging. They settled on a gown of deep emerald green silk. It was deceptively simple, long-sleeved, high-necked, but cut on the bias, so that it clung to her form like liquid shadow. It was the color of money and envy. Paired with her grandmother's diamond and emerald earrings, the only real jewelry she had left from her side of the family, the effect was less wronged ex-wife and more regal, untouchable. But the physical armor was the easy part. The real work was internal. Hannah dug out her old files from the divorce, the ones Sophia had saved on a triple encrypted drive. She reread the NDA. It was brutal. She couldn't discuss the divorce settlement. She couldn't discuss Richard's personal conduct. She couldn't claim any intellectual property not explicitly patented in her name before the company's incorporation. But it didn't say she couldn't attend a shareholder event. It didn't say she couldn't exist. A week before the gala, she did something impulsive. She sent a text. Just 3 words, "Coffee for old times." The reply came almost instantly, where David Chen had been Sterling Innovations' first hire. He was a brilliant, nervous accountant who Hannah had personally recruited. He'd been like a little brother to her. Now he was the chief financial officer. He had testified for Richard during the divorce, a betrayal that had stung more than the affair. They met at a sterile coffee shop in the financial district, far from both their territories. David looked older. His hair was thinner, and he wore the haunted expression of a man who makes a lot of money doing things he doesn't love. "Hannah," he said, fumbling with his cup. He couldn't meet her eyes. "David." She kept her voice even, warm. No accusations. "You look well. CFO. That's incredible." "It's a title," he muttered, stirring his black coffee. "Look, Hannah, about everything. You have to understand. He had me. My student loans, my mother's medical bills. He paid them off. He called it a loyalty bonus. It was a leash." "I know," Hannah said softly, and the honesty of it surprised him. He finally looked up. Her eyes weren't filled with hate. They were just clear. "Why did you want to meet?" he asked, suspicious. "I'm coming to the gala," she said simply. David choked on his coffee, a rattling cough that turned heads. Why, Hannah, don't. It's not the same place. It's not our company anymore." "I know. It's his." "No, not even." David leaned in, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "It's hers. Amber's. She's not just a trophy. She's on the board. She pushes everything. This new Aura 2.0 rollout, it's all her. She wants a faster, flashier product. Richard is obsessed with impressing her. He's not listening to the engineers." "What do you mean?" Hannah asked, her professional curiosity piqued. The Aura system was her baby. It was a predictive smart home AI designed to be secure, intuitive, and above all, stable. "The engineers, the old team, Bill, Sarah, the ones you hired, they're terrified," David whispered, twisting a napkin. "The new 2.0 software is unstable. It's built on a new cheap framework to cut costs. They told Richard the security protocols are a joke, that the whole system could be, well, compromised. Easily. And Richard, he's pushing it to market anyway. The gala is the launch. He's announcing a partnership with Marcus Thorne." Hannah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Marcus Thorne, the billionaire. Not just an investor, a kingmaker. If Thorne invested, Sterling Innovations would go global overnight. And he's selling him a faulty product. He's selling him a lie, David hissed. And that's not all. The financials. Hannah, he's leveraged everything to fund this launch. He's moving money around, from R&D, from the employee pension fund, into boutique projects. Amber's, Hannah guessed. David nodded, his face pale. Amber's Boutique Ventures, a lifestyle brand. He's gutting the company to pay for her vanity projects, all while preparing to sell a ticking time bomb to Marcus Thorne. He's going to cash out Hannah. He's going to sell your legacy, take the money, and leave everyone else, the employees, the shareholders, the customers, to deal with the fallout. Hannah sat back, the coffee forgotten. This was no longer about a broken heart. This wasn't about a smug ex-husband and his new wife. This was about her company, her work. He was going to destroy it. David, she said, her voice dropping to ice. He muzzled me with an NDA. But he didn't muzzle you. As CFO, you have a fiduciary duty. He'll destroy me, David whispered, his eyes wide with panic. I'll be disbarred. I'll go to prison. He'll say I was in on it. And what if he's exposed before the sale? What if someone stopped him? David looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. The quiet, bookish Hannah was gone. In her place was a woman made of steel. I can't, he stammered. I can't be the one. I'm not asking you to be, Hannah said, standing up. I'm a 12% shareholder. I have a right to be at that gala, and I have a right to protect my investment. He won't let you in. He invited me. He'll have security throw you out the second you open your mouth. Then I'll just have to be very, very careful about when I open it. She placed a $50 bill on the table. It was good to see you, David. I'm glad to know that you're still the good man I hired. David watched her walk away, her back straight, her steps unfaltering. He was terrified, but as he looked down at the napkin he had shredded, a tiny forgotten spark of loyalty stirred within him. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to a different number. Bill, it's time. Get the R&D report ready, the one he buried. The St. Regis Hotel was draped in sterling blue. The light from the colossal crystal chandeliers reflected off a massive ice sculpture of the S&I logo. The air hummed with the sound of a string quartet and the murmur of hundreds of voices, all discussing money power and, of course, Richard Sterling. Hannah stepped out of the cab, handing the driver a crisp bill. She had come alone. Sophia had offered, but Hannah had been firm. This is something I have to do myself. She walked up the marble steps, the emerald silk of her gown whispering around her ankles. She bypassed the red carpet where camera flashes were exploding. She was on the guest list, but she wasn't part of the spectacle. Not yet. A woman with a clipboard and a headset gave her a plastic smile. Name, Hannah Juliet. The woman's smile froze. Her eyes flicked up, scanning Hannah from head to toe. The name was on the list, but it was highlighted in red with a note, Alert RS upon arrival. The woman subtly touched her earpiece. Welcome, Ms. Juliet. Please enjoy the evening. Hannah inclined her head and walked in. The ballroom was magnificent, and it was full of ghosts, people she had hired, people she had mentored, people whose kids' birthday parties she had attended. They saw her. The whispers started instantly. My God, is that Hannah Juliet? I thought she'd moved to Switzerland. She looks incredible. What is she doing here? This is going to be a disaster. She ignored them, her eyes scanning for her target. And then she saw them. They were holding court by the champagne tower, the epicenter of the room's gravity. Richard Sterling looked every inch the tech visionary. His tux was custom, his smile was 1,000,000 watts, and his hand was firmly planted on the lower back of his new wife. Amber Sterling was a spectacle. Her dress was a blinding column of silver sequins plunging to her navel and slit to her hip. A diamond necklace, the one Hannah had seen in Vogue, was draped around her throat. She looked less like a corporate spouse and more like a trophy. She was laughing a high, brittle sound as she leaned into Richard. And then, as if sensing a drop in temperature, Richard looked up. His eyes met Hannah's from across the room. His smile didn't falter, but it hardened. It became a mask. He whispered something to Amber, who visibly tensed and clutched his arm. With the practiced ease of a politician, Richard began to steer his new wife directly toward his old one. The divide and conquer approach. He was going to cut her off at the pass, humiliate her quickly and quietly, and force her to retreat. The murmur of the crowd died down. The string quartet seemed to falter. This was the moment. "Hannah!" Richard said, his voice booming with false warmth. "Darling, I'm so glad you could make it. I wasn't sure you'd—" "Well, I'm just so glad." Amber didn't bother with pretense. Her eyes, expertly lined, raked over Hannah with open contempt. "Richard Amber," Hannah said, her voice perfectly calm, perfectly polite. "It's quite the celebration. 10 years. It seems like yesterday we were in the garage on Oakwood." Richard's smile twitched. The mention of the garage of the "we" was a direct hit. Amber stepped forward, placing herself protectively in front of him. "Oh, Hannah, it's so brave of you to come." Amber trilled her voice just loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "And I just love your dress. Is that vintage? It feels familiar? Like something from before." The barb was sharp, meant to paint Hannah as a relic, a thing from the past. Hannah smiled, a small, genuine smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you, Amber. It is an older design." She tilted her head, her emerald earrings catching the light. "It's funny quality. It just lasts. Unlike other things." Amber's face flushed a blotchy red. She had been dismissed, and by the one person in the room she needed to feel superior to. She opened her mouth to retort, but Hannah had already turned back to Richard. "A humanitarian award, Richard. I'm impressed. What's the foundation? The Sterling Fund for—" "The Sterling Family Foundation, yes," Richard said, regaining his composure. He puffed out his chest. "We're focusing on providing tech access to underserved communities." "How wonderful," Hannah said, her voice silk. "It's so important to give back, especially when you've taken so much." Richard's eyes went cold. The mask was slipping. "I don't know what you mean, Hannah, but this is hardly the time or place. We're celebrating our success. We'd appreciate it if you didn't make a scene." "A scene?" Hannah feigned surprise. "Richard, I'm a 12% shareholder. I'm simply here to protect my investment. After all, you're announcing the Aura 2.0 partnership tonight, aren't you? With Marcus Thorne." This he wasn't expecting. His jaw tightened. "That is confidential company business." "Not to me," Hannah said brightly. "I'm just thrilled to see the next generation of my product. I'm sure you've maintained the security standards I established. You always were so thorough." Before Richard could respond, a new voice cut in. "Richard, there you are." It was Marcus Thorne himself, a tall, silver-haired man with the predatory stillness of a shark. His eyes swept over the trio, missing nothing. "Marcus!" Richard exclaimed, his relief palpable. He forcibly draped an arm around Hannah's shoulders. "You must know, this is Hannah Juliet, my old partner. She was with me at the very, very beginning. Hannah, this is Marcus Thorne." He was trying to frame her as a quaint historical artifact. Hannah gracefully slipped out from under his arm and extended her hand to the billionaire. "Mr. Thorne, it's a pleasure. I'm Hannah Juliet. I wrote the original source code for the Aura system." Thorne's eyebrows shot up. He hadn't been expecting this. He took her hand, his grip firm. "Ms. Juliet, your name isn't on any of the founder's documentation I've seen." "No, it isn't," Hannah said, holding his gaze. "We had a creative parting of ways. But I'm sure Richard has told you all about my work on the original kernel, the Juliet protocol, the triple-layer encryption that made it the most secure system on the market for 5 years running." Richard was pale. "Hannah, darling, you're boring Mr. Thorne with technical details." "On the contrary," Thorne said, his eyes fixed on Hannah, "I'm never bored by the details that make me money. Or, save me from losing it. Juliet Protocol. You say interesting. The 2.0 specs I saw mentioned a new streamlined Sterling Price security layer. Ah, yes, Amber chimed in, seeing her name as an opening. Sterling Price. I helped Richard conceptualize it. It's all about speed and user accessibility. Accessibility. Thorne repeated, his expression unreadable. Indeed. If you'll excuse me, Hannah said, giving Thorne a small nod. I see an old colleague, Richard Amber. Congratulations on all of this. She turned and walked away, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Richard was scrambling, trying to laugh off her comments, but Marcus Thorne wasn't laughing. He was watching Hannah's emerald green back as she disappeared into the crowd. Hannah had just fired the first shot, and she hadn't even raised her voice. Hannah moved through the ballroom like a surgeon. Her brief public encounter with the Sterlings had shifted the room's energy. She was no longer just a ghost. She was a presence. She was no longer a victim. She was a variable. She found him by the R&D displays. Bill Peterson. He was one of her first hires, a lead engineer with a brilliant, unkempt mind and a fierce loyalty to the work. He was staring at a sleek holographic display showcasing the Aura 2.0, looking less like a proud father and more like a pallbearer. It's very shiny, Bill, Hannah said quietly, standing beside him. He jumped, spilling a little of his club soda. Hannah, my God, I didn't think you'd actually... You don't look happy, Bill. This is your launch. This isn't a launch, Bill muttered, pulling her aside away from the display. It's a betrayal. We told him. We all told him. The Sterling Price protocol Amber is so proud of, it's a joke. It's a backdoor with a welcome mat. We ran simulations. A moderately skilled hacker could take over a whole network in under an hour. Control the locks, the cameras, the power, everything. And you told Richard this? Hannah asked, her blood running cold. This was worse than she thought. He told me I was losing my nerve, that I was stuck in the past, that Ms. Price, he said the name like it was spoiled milk, had assured him her data-focused groups prioritized speed over invisible security. So he buried our R&D risk assessment, buried it deep. He's selling Thorne a product that could, no exaggeration, lead to the biggest class action lawsuit in tech history. He's not just selling a product, Bill. He's selling the company. Bill's face went white. What, no? He said this partnership was about expansion. He's cashing out. He's using this gala to inflate the stock, get Thorne's signature, and disappear. Probably to an island with no extradition. That son of a... Bill was shaking with rage. All our work, everything you built, he's burning it. He's burning it all down for a quick payday. Where is David Chen? Hannah asked, her voice low and urgent. I don't know. He's been a ghost all night. He's in the founder's circle seating near the stage. He looks like he's going to be sick. Good. Hannah squeezed Bill's arm. Stay near your team, Bill, all the old guard, the ones who remember the garage. Just be ready. Ready for what? For the truth. She left him and made her way toward the heavily guarded founder circle. A velvet rope separated the elite from the merely wealthy. A security guard stepped in her path. Ma'am, this area is reserved. I'm Hannah Juliet, she said, not stopping. My 12% stake pays for this velvet rope. Move. The guard, stunned by her authority, instinctively stepped aside. David was at a table with a few venture capitalists, his face a mask of clammy sweat. Hannah slid into the empty chair beside him. Enjoying the party, David? He flinched violently. Hannah, you can't be here. He'll see us. Let him see us. Did you bring it? Bring what? I don't know what you're talking about. His eyes darted nervously toward the stage where Richard and Amber were now sitting holding hands. David. Hannah's voice was sharp as sting. You called me. You told me about the financials. You told me he was gutting the pension fund. You told me about Amber's boutique ventures. You said he was going to burn it all down. Now did you bring it? David's hand trembled as it slipped into his jacket pocket. He slid a small silver USB drive across the white tablecloth, concealing it with his napkin. It's all there, he whispered, his voice cracking. The real ledgers, not the fantasy ones we're showing Thorne. The shell corporations, the transfers to Amber's business. The internal memo from Bill's team about the Aura 2.0's critical vulnerability, and the signed order from Richard to proceed with launch and contain report. And something else. What? The patent, the Sterling Price Protocol. It's not just bad. I think it's stolen. Stolen from who? I don't know. The source code. It doesn't look like anything Richard's team has ever produced. It looks older, more academic. I don't know, Hannah, but it's the linchpin. He's selling the company based on that fraudulent patent. Hannah palmed the drive. You did the right thing, David. I've just signed my death warrant, he breathed, wiping his face. You've just saved your soul, she countered. Now I need a laptop, a quiet place, and 10 minutes. The north alcove, behind the stage. It's a small AV control room. It should be empty. The AV guys are all out front for the main presentation. Thank you, David. Hannah. He grabbed her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. What are you going to do? I'm going to read my company's annual report, she said, pulling her arm free. She slipped away from the table. As she walked toward the stage, she passed Richard and Amber. Amber shot her a look of pure venom, a silent, "Why are you still here?" Hannah simply smiled a polite, vacant smile and continued past them, disappearing behind the heavy velvet curtain that led backstage. Richard watched her go, a flicker of genuine panic in his eyes. He leaned over to his head of security. Find out where she went, and do not let her near the stage, or a microphone. Do you understand? The man nodded and slipped away, but he was too late. Hannah was already inside the AV room. The AV room was small, dark, and blessedly quiet. The only light came from a bank of monitors showing different angles of the ballroom. On the main screen, a promotional video had begun a glossy, airbrushed history of Sterling innovations. Hannah could hear the muffled, triumphant music through the door. She sat at the console, her heart hammering against her ribs. The emerald dress felt suddenly too tight. She slid the silver USB drive into the port. A folder popped up. Confidential. Eyes only. DC. She clicked it. It was a labyrinth of deceit. David hadn't exaggerated. Hannah, who had once balanced the company's books on her home computer, now navigated the spreadsheet jungle of a corporate sociopath. File after file showed the systematic draining of the company. Funds allocated for research and development were rerouted to a shell company called Price Sterling Holdings. From there, millions were transferred to Amber's Boutique Ventures, which, according to the attached invoices, had spent $800,000 on brand consultation and $1.2 million on product sourcing, which Hannah recognized as a lavish trip to Paris and Milan. He was funding her shopping sprees with his employees' pension funds. She opened the next folder, Aura 2.0, Internal. There it was, Bill's report, Critical Vulnerability Advisory. It was 40 pages long, detailing in excruciating technical language exactly how the new Sterling Price Protocol was, as Bill had said, a back door with a welcome mat. It would allow anyone with basic skills to access a user's entire home network. It was a digital time bomb. Beneath it was a one-page PDF, a direct order from Richard. The risk is theoretical and acceptable. The launch window is non-negotiable. Contain this report. All copies to be destroyed. It was digitally signed Richard D. Sterling, CEO. This was it. This was the proof. This would stop the sale to Marcus Thorne. This would expose Richard as a reckless, negligent fraud. But David had said there was something else. The patent. She found the last folder, Patent, SP Proto. She opened the source code file. and she stopped breathing. Her blood turned to ice. Her hands went numb. She stared at the screen, at the lines of code, at the syntax, at the annotations. It wasn't academic. It wasn't stolen from a rival. It was hers. It was the unfinished code from her doctoral thesis, the one she had been working on when she met Richard, the one he had dismissed as esoteric nonsense with no commercial application. It was her work on dynamic predictive AI, a new way of teaching machines to anticipate security threats. He hadn't just stolen it. He had taken her raw, brilliant, unfinished work, slapped a new name on it, and passed it off as his own. Amber's name. Sterling Price. The man hadn't just cheated on her. He hadn't just pushed her out of her own company. He had hollowed her out, taken her very identity as an innovator, and was now selling it to the highest bidder. The vulnerability Bill had found wasn't a flaw in her original code. It was a flaw in the cheap, rushed way Richard's team had tried to implement it. She heard the muffled applause from the ballroom. On the monitor, she saw Richard and Amber walking toward the stage. The award ceremony was beginning. A cold, clarifying rage settled over Hannah. This was no longer about a failed marriage. It was no longer about money. It was about a fundamental theft of her mind. She copied the entire contents of the USB drive. She opened the AV console's main operating system. She saw the presentation file queued up, Gala Speech Final v3.mp4. With a steady hand, she dragged Bill's 40-page critical vulnerability report, the PDF of Richard's contain order, and the side-by-side comparison of her thesis code and the Sterling Price patent. And she embedded them into the presentation's timeline. She set them to display on every screen in the room, including the massive 50-foot jumbotron behind the stage on a trigger. She then stood up, smoothed her emerald dress, and walked out of the AV room. She found the head of security waiting for her. "Ma'am, you're not allowed back here." "Oh, thank goodness," Hannah said, her voice trembling with manufactured distress. I got lost. I was looking for the ladies' room. I'm so embarrassed. Can you show me back to my seat?" The guard, seeing not a threat but a flustered woman, softened. Yeah, this way, ma'am." He led her back out into the ballroom just as the presenter, a local news anchor, was booming, "And now to accept the Humanitarian of the Year award and to give the evening's keynote address, the visionary founder and CEO of Sterling Innovations, Mr. Richard Sterling." The room erupted in applause. Richard and Amber walked onto the stage waving and smiling. They were bathed in a golden spotlight. Richard kissed Amber deeply, a theatrical, possessive gesture for the crowd, before he stepped up to the podium. Hannah melted back into the shadows near the soundboard, her eyes fixed on the stage. "Thank you," Richard beamed, holding the heavy crystal award aloft. "Thank you. I am humbled, truly humbled." Amber stood just behind him, her hand on his back, her silver dress so bright it was almost painful to look at. She was the picture of the adoring, supportive wife. "When I started Sterling Innovations 10 years ago," Richard began, his voice resonating with practiced sincerity, "I had nothing but a dream, an idea, that technology could do more than just obey. It could anticipate, that it could protect us." Hannah felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. His dream, his idea. "It was a lonely road," he continued. "One I walked by myself for a long time. This was it, the final erasure." Hannah watched as men in the audience nodded rapt. He was feeding them the myth of the lone male genius, and they were eating it up. "But I persevered, and we built Aura, a system that changed the very nature of the smart home. And tonight I am so proud to announce the next leap forward, Aura 2.0. A smattering of applause. Marcus Thorne at his front table watched the stage with a neutral, calculating expression. "Aura 2.0 is more than an upgrade," Richard said, his voice swelling. "It's a revolution. Faster, smarter, more intuitive than ever. And it is all thanks to the inspiration of my beautiful wife, My partner in all things, Amber Sterling." He gestured to Amber, who stepped forward and gave a small tearful wave. The Sterling Price Protocol, which she helped conceptualize, is the new gold standard in user-friendly security. Hannah's hand clenched at her side. User-friendly security. A lie that would put thousands of families at risk. "And it is this innovation," Richard said, turning to Marcus Thorne's table, "that will be the foundation of our new partnership with Thorne Global. A partnership that will put a secure Aura unit in every home in America." The room applauded wildly. Richard raised his hand, basking in it. This was his triumph. He had won. He had rewritten history, secured his fortune, and was about to walk off into the sunset with his trophy wife and Hannah's stolen legacy. "He's a fool," Hannah whispered to herself. She slipped from the shadows and began to walk. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She just walked. Directly toward the stage. The security guard Richard had posted saw her. "Ma'am, stop." But it was too late. She was already at the small steps at the side of the stage. The news anchor presenter tried to block her. "Ma'am, this is a private event." "I'm a 12% shareholder." Hannah said, her voice clear and carrying in the sudden hush. The applause had died. Every eye was on her. "I have a question for the CEO." On stage, Richard's face had gone from triumph to apoplectic rage. "Hannah, what the hell do you think you're doing? Get her off the stage. She's hysterical. She's drunk." "I'm not drunk, Richard," Hannah said, stepping onto the stage. She was calm. She was terrifyingly calm. "I'm just a co-founder, and I have a correction to the presentation." Amber shrieked, "Get your hands off him, security!" Two large guards were rushing the stage, but a new voice cut through the chaos. "Let her speak." It was Marcus Thorne. He was standing now. His voice was quiet, but it had the authority of billions. The guards froze. Richard looked at Thorne, his face a mask of panic. "Marcus, she's a disgruntled ex-wife. This is a private domestic issue." "It stopped being a domestic issue, Mr. Sterling." Thorne said, his eyes like chips of ice. "When you started pitching me a product built on user-friendly security. I'd like to hear what the other founder has to say." "Ms. Juliet, the floor is yours." The room was so quiet Hannah could hear Amber's ragged, shallow breathing. Hannah walked past her, past Richard, and stood at the second podium, the one the news anchor had abandoned. She looked out at the sea of faces, executives, investors, journalists. "Good evening," she said, her voice amplified by the microphone. It was crystal clear with no trace of hysteria. "My name is Hannah Juliet, and Richard is right about one thing. He did start this company with a dream. He just forgot to mention it was my dream." She turned to the jumbotron behind Richard's head. "Computer," she said, using the AV system's voice command. "Load file vulnerability report.pdf." And suddenly the 50-foot screen behind Richard and Amber was no longer a tasteful blue logo. It was Bill Peterson's 40-page report. The words critical vulnerability and risk catastrophic were visible even from the back of the room. "This," Hannah said, gesturing to the screen, "is the real R&D report for Aura 2.0, the one Mr. Sterling ordered buried. It details how the Sterling Price Protocol, the one my replacement is so proud of, is, and I quote, a backdoor with a welcome mat. It's a system designed to fail." The room erupted in gasps. Journalists were scrambling, cameras flashing. Bill Peterson in the crowd was staring white-faced at the screen. "He's lying," Amber screamed. "She's a liar. Richard, make her stop." "Oh, I'm not done," Hannah said. "Computer load file, contain order, PDF." The screen changed. There it was, Richard's memo, his signature. "Contain this report. Proceed with launch." Richard looked like he had been punched. He lunged for Hannah to grab the mic, but the two security guards, now watching Marcus Thorne for cues, stepped in front of Richard, blocking him. "And finally," Hannah said, her voice dropping, "the inspiration. Mr. Sterling and Ms. Price are innovators, it's true. They innovated a new way to steal." Computer load file. Code comparison PDF. The screen split. On the left, Hannah Juliet Doctoral Thesis 2011 Dynamic Predictive AI. On the right, Sterling Price Protocol Patent Application 2024. It was her code, line for line, her annotations, her work. "Richard didn't just push me out of my company," Hannah said, her voice shaking with a cold, precise fury. "He stole my work, my mind, and tried to sell it to you. He gutted the company, funneling millions from your pension funds." She looked at the employees. "Into his wife's shell companies, all to fund a lie." She looked at Amber, whose face was a grotesque mask of horror and disbelief. "He didn't just replace me, Amber. He plagiarized me, and he put your name on it." Richard Sterling was silent. He was ruined. He knew it. The flash of cameras was deafening. Hannah looked out at the crowd, at the men and women she had worked with. "On November 4th, 2013, she said, "in a garage on Oakwood Drive, we had an idea that we could build something that mattered, something that protected people. That idea, that was Sterling Innovations. What this is," she gestured to the sputtering, humiliated man beside her, "is a fraud." She set the microphone down. The silence in the room was absolute, a crushing physical weight. Hannah set the microphone down. The solid thud as it settled into its cradle was the only sound in the colossal ballroom. It was an absolute crushing vacuum-like silence, as if her final words had sucked all the air from the room. The string quartet was frozen, bows hovering over strings. Waiters stood like statues, trays of champagne forgotten. Every eye was locked on the stage. She took her first deep, unimpeded breath in 2 years. The adrenaline was a cold, clean fire in her veins. She felt still. She turned her movements unhurried. She looked at Amber. The younger woman was a grotesque parody of her earlier confidence. Her face beneath its expensive layers of makeup was a mask of sheer, uncomprehending horror. Her eyes were fixed on the jumbotron where her name was inextricably linked to the words "Fraud Shell Company" and "plagiarized." She wasn't just implicated. She was exposed as a fool, a patsy, a cheap accessory he had tagged onto a brilliant woman's stolen work. Amber's gaze tore from the screen and locked onto Richard. It was a look of such reptilian fury that Hannah almost felt a chill. This wasn't the look of a heartbroken wife. It was the look of a co-conspirator who had just been betrayed. "You!" Amber whispered, a sound so guttural it was barely human. "You idiot!" With a convulsive sob that was more rage than sorrow, she clawed at the custom diamond SP necklace, the one Hannah now realized stood for Sterling Price, and ripped it from her throat. The diamonds, Richard's gift to her, clattered loudly onto the stage, scattering like tiny, worthless chips of ice. She didn't just flee. She stumbled, her silver stilettos catching on a monitor cable, and she scrambled off the side of the stage, a desperate, pathetic mess of silver sequins and streaming mascara, her sobs echoing back into the silent room. Then Hannah turned to Richard. He was still standing behind the podium, a marble statue of a man. His skin was the color of old parchment. His eyes were wide, fixed on the screen, displaying his own signature on the contain order. He looked small. The custom-tailored tuxedo, which had seemed so imposing moments before, now hung on him a size too large. The heavy crystal Humanitarian of the Year award beside him looked like a prop from a tragedy. He opened his mouth. A dry clicking sound came out, the sound of a man trying to summon a lie that wouldn't come. He looked at Hannah, and his expression wasn't just hatred. It was a profound cosmic bafflement. He genuinely could not comprehend how this had happened. In his world, he was the visionary. He was the hero. She was the prologue. He had rewritten the story, and she had just set fire to the book. Hannah looked at this man she had once loved. This man who had hollowed out her life, and she felt nothing. Not pity, not rage, not even triumph. Just the quiet, definitive click of a lock falling into place. It was over. She turned her back on him, on the ruin he had made, and began to walk toward the steps to leave the stage. The walk felt impossibly long, each click of her heel on the polished wood a hammer blow in the suffocating silence. And then, a sound. Crack. A single sharp percussive clap. It was so loud in the void it sounded like a rifle shot. Hannah paused, her foot hovering over the top step. She looked out into the darkness of the ballroom. David Chen was on his feet. His table was in the front near the stage, and he was completely exposed. His face was a wreck, his glasses askew, his cheeks streaked with tears of terror and relief. But he was standing, and he was clapping. His hands hit each other with a slow, deliberate, painful force. He wasn't just applauding her. He was applauding his own liberation, breaking the chains of fear and complicity with every impact. He met her eyes, and in them she saw a decade of shame washed away. He was atoning. That single act of courage broke the spell. Another figure stood, Bill Peterson. His face was pale, his rumpled suit a stark contrast to the tuxedos around him. But his eyes were burning with a professional vindication that was almost holy. He didn't clap. He just stood, a silent salute from one engineer to another. Then, as if pulled by a string, his entire R&D team, Sarah, Mike, the ones who had signed the buried report, rose as one. They were standing with Bill. This wasn't applause. It was a mutiny. Then a ripple. From a table in the back, Jennifer, the head of marketing Hannah had hired right out of college, stood up. Then the finance team, the ones who had been forced to cook the books for David, stood. The applause started to swell, not as a roar, but as a growing, rumbling wave. It was the sound of the old guard. The people who remembered the garage, the ones who remembered her vision. The journalists smelling the biggest corporate scandal of the decade were next. They shot to their feet, their applause frantic secondary to the blinding blitzkrieg of camera flashes. It was a wall of magnesium pops, a strobe light assault capturing the fall of an empire and the coronation of its exiled queen. The investors stood last. They were pragmatists. They saw the R&D team, the undeniable proof of fraud on the Jumbotron, and the one person in the room who held the original uncorrupted key to the entire technology. They stood, their applause crisp, respectful, and calculating. They weren't clapping for justice. They were clapping for their new and only viable asset. The applause was thunderous now. The entire ballroom was on its feet, except for one man, Marcus Thorne. He had remained seated, his expression unreadable, watching the entire execution. The applause, as if sensing a final judgment was yet to be rendered, slowly died down. All eyes turned to the billionaire. His silence was more absolute than the one that had come before. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus Thorne folded his linen napkin and placed it on the table. He rose to his full imposing height. He did not look at Hannah. He looked directly at Richard, who was still paralyzed by the podium. "Mr. Sterling." Thorne's voice was quiet, without amplification, yet it sliced through the vast room with the chilling precision of a scalpel. "You and I will not be doing business." He let the words hang in the air, a death sentence. "In fact," Thorne continued, "you should consider this conversation our only one. My legal team, who are far less pleasant than I am, will be in touch regarding your spectacular, fraudulent misrepresentation. I suspect," he added, tilting his head slightly, "the Securities and Exchange Commission will be in touch shortly after." A low, animalistic moan tore itself from Richard's throat. He finally completely collapsed. He didn't just sit. He crumpled, folding in on himself, his head falling into his hands on the podium. His body was racked with the dry, silent sobs of a man who had just lost everything. Then Marcus Thorne turned his gaze to Hannah. She was still poised on the step, a figure of emerald green stillness. "Ms. Juliet," he said, and his voice was entirely different. It was sharp, appreciative, all business. "A remarkable presentation. You own 12% of this compromised entity. As of this moment, Mr. Sterling's stock is worthless and his position as CEO is void. I'd say your 12% just became the controlling interest in a company I am now very interested in saving. A company I am interested in rebuilding around its original architect. He gave her a sharp, appraising nod. My team will be calling your team in the morning. We will be discussing a new valuation and a new CEO. For a second, the room was silent, and then it exploded. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar. It was cheers. It was the cathartic, deafening sound of a verdict delivered and justice unequivocally served. The entire room, hundreds of the city's most powerful people, was standing. They were not standing for Richard. They were not standing for Amber. They were standing for Hannah. She looked out at them. At David, who was smiling, his face a beacon of relief. At Bill, who gave her a small, respectful nod of true partnership. At Marcus Thorne, who was already on his phone, no doubt beginning the hostile and now very friendly takeover. This was it. The public acknowledgement. The ultimate vindication. She was no longer a ghost. She was no longer the discarded first wife. She was once again the founder. Hannah Juliet felt the last trace of adrenaline recede, leaving not exhaustion, but a profound, steely calm. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. This wasn't a moment for tears. It was a moment of restoration. She straightened her back, a queen accepting the return of her crown. As the applause swelled to a deafening, cleansing crescendo, she turned her back on the wreckage of her past, on the weeping, broken man at the podium, and walked, her head held high. She descended the steps, and the crowd parted for her as she moved, a sea of respect. She walked with purpose and grace out of the ballroom and into her future. The truth, like that emerald green dress, is a powerful thing. It doesn't fade, and it always, always comes back in style. Hannah Juliet walked into that party as a ghost, but she walked out as a legend. She didn't go for revenge. She went for justice. She reminded everyone that you can't erase a person's contribution, you can't steal their legacy, and you cannot silence a woman who has finally found her voice. The standing ovation wasn't just for her, it was for every person who has ever been overlooked, underestimated, or had their work stolen. What did you think of Hannah's story? Have you ever seen someone get their power back in such a spectacular way? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true life stories of justice drama and incredible comebacks. We all have a story. It's time to tell it.